Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third episode of the Wednesday podcast. We still haven't come up with a name, but you know what? I'm just going to go with Wannabe Wednesdays for now, with BBQ, that's me, and Woodshrew. And what do you think about that, Shrew? Because what exactly do we want to be? I'm not sure, but it's like, we want to talk about pro Dota, and we want to be in the scene, and we want to be, we want to be relevant, but it's just hard to get there.
I don't know, dude. I don't know if we should show our hand that we're really trying really desperately. I don't know if we want to have that in the name. I like the sound of barbecue shrew. I just think of that some kind of barbecued skewered Taiwanese night market meat skewer thing, but I don't know if everyone else gets that imagery from me. So yeah, sure, okay.
So kind of related to that, my name's always been Korean barbecue. My picture used to be one of a cat, actually with just to sync up with my friends, but I didn't want people to get the wrong idea, so I kind of don't want people to get the wrong idea.
I see.
The barbecue
I like it.
as well. I'm not even Korean, but I just don't want people to get that idea. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, again, we're leaving it out there. We're still kind of searching for names, but we'll just go with Wannabe Wednesdays for now. It's got the alliteration and it rhymes, and it's consistent with our DOTP network of podcasts, so we'll just go with that for now.
I'm sure we'll change it every week, so just keep you guys on your toes.
Yep. So this show is gonna be mostly about the reshuffles in the scene. Obviously, the roster lock is basically tonight for teams to submit rosters for the Shanghai Major. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. Just to quickly go over the week of competitive Dota. I mean, at this point, there's a lot of saturation in the scene, a lot of tournaments, and just a lot of teams playing a ton of different tournaments, big and small, traveling all over the place. OG is one of these teams, and I think they've finally been bested in a recent finals as they lost to Liquid 3-1 in the defense finals. And did you take away anything from that? Is it time to hit the panic button, or is it just, are these things just going to happen when you have to play nonstop? True.
I did watch a interview, I think, with Fly with a Dota Capitalist at the Join Dota Studios where the defense took place. So just to clarify, OG did lose 3-1 to Liquid in the defense finals, and already heading into the series, which is when the interview took place, Fly was talking about just the general confidence level of the team. And despite their very strong performances, obviously, I think Capitalist even went ahead and said it was you guys are the best team right now, very clearly best team after winning the majors. He was a little bit more hesitant to kind of crown themselves that, and he showed a lot of modesty in terms of respecting the field and saying that, hey, we play to our potential, but I don't think that it's anything that special. And I think obviously they weren't able to take the tournament home, but that's kind of consistent with just everyone's general feelings about the current competitive landscape, where I think I've stressed this a few times now, but there are just a bunch of teams vying for that number one spot, and it's not that big of a difference and not that big of a gap between OG and the rest of the pack and just everyone else.
Yeah, it seems that Team Liquid are kind of showing their stuff. Of course, they failed to qualify for Frankfurt, but since then they've played pretty well in this final series. I think they run rather convincingly. They punished a couple of really greedy drafts from OG. The first game they tried to run Shadow Fiend and Anti-Mage, and then Liquid came up with a solution for the Phantom Lancer, which is become one of OG's signature heroes for No Tail, in running the Legion Commander in Game 4 together with the Tiny. So plenty of AoE damage there. And then finally in the last game, they ran that Ursa counter to the Alchemist, which we kind of saw from eHome with CTY. And that Ursa just ate that Alchemist alive. Every single time he came back to the mid lane, the Ursa was there and just blew him up. So at some point it was almost like Miracle seems to have almost given up on this game. He just keeps running mid, and he's like, all right, if you kill me, you kill me. If you don't, I might get some farm. We might have a chance. So maybe just some fatigue there. These teams just have to play an absolute ton of games. And speaking of fatigue, another team that's been performing very strongly in recent tournaments, Secret, has had some trouble this week as well. I think they've lost 3 matches. I believe it was to Navi, to CIS Rejects, who are now rebranded as Team Spirit, and some other match that they dropped. So Yeah, I mean, again, like these tournaments aren't considered too big in terms of the prize pools and such. Maybe the importance of the tournaments. Maybe it's just too much travel for them. But we'll see if things pick up in terms of a couple big tournaments on the horizon that we'll get to later, as far as the Summit and as well WCA, which is suddenly, which we'll talk about later, become a much more intriguing tournament with a lot more solid teams competing there in Yinchuan, China.
Yeah, I felt like every single day this past week I would just tune into Twitch and see Secret down one game in a BO3 on English Star Ladder channel, but they seem to still have another life left, and they'll be able to resolve whether or not they can make it to the Star Ladder I-League LAN finals, I think, very soon, and we'll be able to maybe bring some commentary on that series because I'll definitely tune in when Team Secret's playing interesting series. So, yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the big fish that we're going to fry this week, which is the reshuffle and the eventual stabilization of rosters. Last week we talked about Alliance, basically how we were saying they went along this model of kind of bringing back all of their old players one by one, and they actually completed that bringing back of the old, getting the band back together as they finally added EGM, the missing piece of the TI3 puzzle for Alliance. So what do you think about this squad?
Uh, I don't know. Like I have quite a few doubts. They did sort of have a little bit of a reunion in like early 2015, earlier this year. EGM did come back to the Alliance squad, I think for around a month, but that really didn't. It didn't seem like it really brought anything fresh to the team. Like I remember watching their games. It was quite a long ways back, but it just didn't seem to like electrify the team at all. Like it didn't really give them any kind of bump in the right direction. It just looked like, oh, there's EGM now, but Alliance is still playing generally the same way. It's not like some injection of energy or whatnot. And so after just like a very few couple of weeks, I think he was replaced and to give way for Seven Mad, Sebastian, and that rendition of Alliance actually was very successful. I felt with Pycat playing mid and Nikwa on the offlane, I think. Or yeah, I think Nikwa offlane, and then Mad and Ake supporting and Loda. I remember that Alliance was able to get quite a few, just look quite strong in qualifiers and those kind of like day-to-day tournament action. But Alliance has never been able to really break into that just like really top flight European standard, and they've always just been kind of good, taking games off of good teams, but also giving up series where they maybe should prevail. And yeah, I don't think this is as momentous of a roster change as say Bulldog rejoining or especially S4 rejoining because I never really got the impression that EGM was like the kind of heart and soul of the team. He's definitely contributed a lot. I mean, no doubt in their TI3 victory, but like reobtaining your like captain in like S4 and your drafter in S4, I think meant more. And with this change, I think it's more of just like a team cohesion kind of thing, and it will remain to be seen if that can kind of overcome the issues that they've been facing with for the last couple months of their rather, I'd say, mediocre performance.
You know what? I couldn't help but think of this comparison at some point. So, have you ever seen Anchorman 2?
No, I haven't seen that movie.
All right. Well, the original Anchorman, I mean, that movie was just an absolute classic. I mean, a lot of people didn't like it, but it had a certain just absurd, clownish memeness to it that made it basically a cult classic for a lot of people. And when I think about bringing the band back together, this is basically the Anchorman 2, this Alliance version. And let me tell you about Anchorman 2. I could not sit through that movie. I could not believe that this was the offspring, that this was the second rendition of the first Anchorman. I mean, you had the same people, and you had a lot of returning cast members and such, but it just lost something. Like everything just felt so forced, and it didn't have nearly the same quality and the same brilliance of the original version. And maybe it's because some time passed between those two movies and things just changed in terms of comedy or in terms of the people who were involved. And and we can make another parallel here with Envy as Mantooth, Vince, played by Vince Vaughn, who's basically this tall, very passionate, kind of goofy guy who's on the who was kind of one of them, but now is on the other side. But I mean, I don't know. It just feels like it's past their time. Like, do you think it's because maybe there's some issues with their adjustment to the metagame? Maybe there's an issue with, like, some of these players are first generation players. I mean, Loda, I believe, is 27 years old. That's starting to get to old man fear range. Are they just have they just not adapted to the new climate, or what?
I do get that kind of impression that they have issues with sort of going with the flow and kind of adapting with each different patch and metagame. Like, especially when you look at the way they've been drafting as of recent. I think the most noticeable thing you'll see is like S4 playing heroes that are very like divergent. Like, you'll see him play Bat Rider like just all the time, and also just him not playing Shadow Fiend very frequently is very strange because, I mean, almost every team will first pick Shadow Fiend and is very, very comfortable running it mid lane. And for a long time, I don't think Loda has been sort of riding the ever-changing carry playstyle. Like, if you think about the fresh ways that carry is being played, like the one position, when you look at players like Arteezy or Envy, and even like his European contemporaries like Silent and Illidan, those two have been playing like just spectacular for the last very long time, maybe like a year, more than a year. And Envy and Arteezy having their own very unique approach to the game. Like, you don't really know where Loda fits in that kind of group. And when you just start listing other carries and their playstyles and what they bring to the team, it just feels kind of strange. And where to slide Loda in? Does he rank amongst the best, even just in the European scene? Maybe not. What does that put Alliance in terms of like a global sense when it comes every year? They're international. And so that casts a lot of doubt in my mind as to whether Alliance can really just bounce back and be like current, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, they've got the old band, and we'll see how they perform. Whether that kind of ratty metagame that they excelled and first showed their brilliance in is one that they can put behind them and adjust to today's day and age. And of course, we'll see with the new patch. Hey, maybe that style will come back into vogue, and maybe they'll hit their stride again. We'll see. So, speaking of other big changes and shakeups, in staying in the European scene this time in CIS, so we have basically two major team changes. We have Virtus Pro replacing Illidan, their long-standing carry, who I believe had played almost 1,000 games with them, with Silent. So, what do you think about this change here for Virtus Pro?
It's a very surprising change, I think, because Virtus Pro is one of the most like stable rosters in this past year, and it was quite last minute, as were a lot of these changes that we're going to kind of get to. But for someone just so recognizably part of like an organization to be kind of removed this close to like the roster deadline is a little bit unfortunate. I think there were some comments shared on Twitter between I think FNG and some other pros commenting how looked really a little bit shady from their perspective. But I think a big part of it is just that Silent became available, and I think he's considered one of the best carries around in the European scene. And so there have been some doubts about like Illidan's just general playstyle. Like, I don't think many people are like question his ability to farm and to just go crazy late game, and are like his ability to kind of play hard carry. But in different patches, you kind of have to adapt to different timing windows for how active you have to be as a carry player. And I think after watching a couple like good Kappa casts with like Arteezy and Envy and like Piladai just chatting about what they thought about Illidan, like people kind of ridicule him a bit, poke fun about how he has like these bad habits and stuff. So I think that VP will look to be definitely a stronger team with Silent, just because I think he's a little bit more of a stable player, and he's just a little bit better, well-rounded carry player. What do you think?
Interesting. My impression of Illidan, even though he was there for a long time as one of the stalwarts of the team, is that he's an incredibly aggressive player. He's capable of a lot of carries. I think follow this trend where they do things that are unusually aggressive and things that you might consider to be wrong, but it kind of depends. It might take people by surprise, or kind of depends on how their team feels with it. So I remember Illidan would play anti-mage, and most anti-mages you kind of expect to just sit back and safely farm. But he had that game where he went like 20-2 or something in a very short time. He was just constantly at the front of fights and just making these razor's edge aggressive plays. So I was really happy to see that. I thought that was really not just entertaining, but like kind of just changed the boundaries of how people played the hero. So, it was a lot of fun to watch that, and hopefully VP will continue to be a strong team in kind of this CIS resurrection of sorts, and we'll see how Silent does in his place. And speaking of resurrection, well, Empire undergoing a little bit of course, lost a player, but they've picked up the two former Navi stalwarts, one of them being Havost and also Funix. So this is another new empire, so to speak. What do you think about this team and the page that they're turning?
I'm like super excited. I think Funnick, something about Funnick and just Empire, like their ties. It just seems like it's just the right fit. Something about that fit between the player and the organization. He stood in for them in the past. I think he's picked up maybe even 2 LAN victories as a stand-in, like official stand-in with Empire. So even when there were moments where Navi was like really in a downward slump, Funnick would just like hop in, put on the Empire shirt for a weekend, and just like lead his old his old team to victory. And it just like, filled me with good feels. And it's just like, man, I wish Funnick could return to that team. Like, I didn't really follow Funnick when he started out on Team Empire, but some of the friends that I played Dota with and kind of introduced me to Dota, they would always like kind of gush about like, man, Funnick was at one point just an amazing player. And with Empire, he was just so good. So while I don't really have like direct, experience watching him play for that in those old days, it seems like they're trying to recapture something with that re-edition. And with Havost replacing Silent, like I'm also super excited because like I have to admit, like I did fall in love with Navi as a early Dota 2 fan. Like it's really hard not to when Dendy's so charismatic and Havost is just hilarious. Just everything, all the memes, like everything about Havost is just funny. And I think that those two players kind of moving away from an organization that was just that carried so many expectations and so many of the hopes of the fans and Western Dota, with so much like kind of released off their back, and like the burden kind of just they can play free in a sense, And with Empire, they're not those two players aren't gonna have any kind of step down in terms of talent. Like Resolution is a brilliant mid player, right? And those two supports in Aloha and No Fear, like they have crazy amount of potential just in terms of just skill. Those two are just one of the most skilled support duos in the scene. So to step away from Navi and join just a maybe equally or more talented roster, it's I think it might be a blessing for their next step in their careers.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting to see within this next season, these next few months, how these new CIS teams gel and carry the flag forward, and maybe if Navi itself can kind of recapture some of its old glory. And speaking of signature players in new places, Chuan, who for many is the face of IG, certainly in terms of interviews and such. Chuan speaks some English, and he's managed to do that himself. He's probably one of the most identifiable, if not the most identifiable player on IG. He has announced that he will be leaving IG for Newbie. He's going to go back to Malaysia, renew his passport, and then come back, renew his visa rather, and then come back. And then when he comes back, he will join a Newbie. So that's another big change. What do you think about this one, True?
I was sort of confused or like a little bit doubtful about whether or not it was really going to be true when I first started hearing the rumors on like Reddit. Some broken English from some Chinese Reddit users, like something Chuan's leaving IG. Someone else is like, no, he just needs to renew his visa. And then someone else makes a post, newbie.chuan. I was like, all right, this is happening, it seems. And I think it's just been very difficult for me to get an idea of like how good Chuan and IG kind of fit in the past, because I'll be honest, I didn't really watch a lot of their gameplay at TI2. It's kind of difficult to go back and get a good sense of how good a player is or how good a team is. it's just very hard to kind of go back and watch Dota because like just the way it's played is so different, and it's just still a bit confusing. But with Chuan, IG has had periods of just like very very strong play, especially I'd say pre TI4 era, when I think Ferrari was playing a lot of Ember Spirit. Um, Man, that team just looked really good. I think that's what back when Bernie was on that team, if I'm not wrong, and yeah, like they've had a lot of talk. There's been a lot of rumors about like internal conflict and just tensions between players on that team. Some like past strained relationships with YYF and Ferrari, stuff like that. And with Chuan being such a little bit of like a polarizing leader, like with the highs he can really really ride the highs, and with the lows, it seems like he can kind of just like shout out his teammates and kind of bring a little bit of negativity. Uh, I think that it might be the right step, and something that's sort of like in line with like the Havost and Funnick leaving Navi. I just kind of have this impression that Chuan is still a player that has a lot to offer a team because he can be such a brilliant leader and a support player. But I just don't. I think his time with IG might be up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think something you touched on was kind of the intensity of certain players. I mean, some people have a relatively measured style of leadership. Maybe some are just very intense, and it's this is not always a good fit. There are cultural implications to this and how people respond to that. But generally speaking, I find Chinese teams, as far as what I've observed close, to be very, very, very vocal. Even when they're winning games, they kind of just really just have at it. Everyone gets very loud because they're often used to speaking very loudly, and they often just hash things out like that. So it's hard to tell whether there's actually some kind of internal strife or if that's just how they usually deal with things. But in terms of newbie, I think what's interesting about the newbie dynamic is this is a team that people widely have said more or less lost motivation after winning TI. So you have a former TI champ basically uniting with more recent TI champions, and the rumor for newbie, as far as I can tell, is that Xiao Tulei, their offlane player or three position player, might be the one leaving the team because I think he posted online something about not liking the practice habits of his teammates. So because of that, you have to kind of wonder questions of motivation. I mean, again, you don't want to read too much into things, but Newbie, of course, the team that lost to Unknown in the best of one in Frankfurt, and just looking at their kind of body language and stuff after the game, yeah, they did argue a little bit about the fights, but also they didn't seem too perturbed about it. I mean, some teams when they lose, like they don't want to talk to anybody for a while, and they just kind of want to be in their own cocoon. Newbie, I mean, again, I could be reading too much into this, but they seemed almost at peace with that, and
Oh man.
I don't know. It's something that maybe is pretty embarrassing for them. Didn't seem especially so, and they kind of just wanted to get out of there. So, is there a difference in motivation here? Is a Chuan in a new setting going to reinvigorate and bring that motivation to his teammates and make Newbie relevant again internationally as a team, or is that is there going to be an immediate conflict there in terms of just keeping focus? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to say how that goes. And you know what? Speaking of all that stuff that I just talked about, one of the smaller changes, I suppose, on the scene, although big for me, much bigger for me personally, is Black is out of Fnatic. So Fnatic had previously announced on their Twitter that they're not going to be making any changes, but Black kind of said due to a sudden turn of events, he is out of the team, and he actually formed another squad called No Vaseline with some other cast-off players. So what do you think about Black's departure, and whether this new squad has any potential? Where do you think Black's trajectory ultimately is? Like, do you think there's a place for him and he should stay in Asia, or do you think Europe or NA could use him? Do you think his style, maybe very farm heavy, is a little out of touch with the current meta, or what are your thoughts on him?
It's kind of hard for me to get a very good sense of Black as a player and how he's like valued in the community, the professional community, because it's just so strange. Because even when he was playing at maybe like the height of his ability, back when he was playing with Vici Gaming, I think late 2014, when they were having a lot of success in like the post TI era. post TI4 kind of like phase. I remember like Vici had won like ESL or something like that with ESL New York with like Black or something like that. Like they were winning tournament after tournament, and even then there was still a lot of like talks about, they don't want to really stay with Black long term. They're still looking for like greener pastures and maybe picking up How at that time, taking How up from like newbie. And so like even when Black is doing well and his team's winning, even then he's still kind of on like the trade, on the block. So it's like it says something about maybe his limitations as like and his limitations and his inability to sort of gel with Asian teams. Like there's obviously some language barriers that he has to overcome that other players just don't have to face. And for some reason, he's just been sort of this kind of outcast in the Western scene, despite his pretty respectable tournament results of recent memory. Maybe not like this year, but definitely last year. So yeah, it's just he's sort of an enigma to me. Just sort of vagabond wanderer type that's just kind of doesn't seem to have a real direction and makes it really difficult for me to have an idea of where he's headed, whether it's to more competitive teams and someone who like maybe TI contenders, or hopefully not in a where he's headed right now, no Vaseline squad or whatever. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Well, you know what? I've just got to say, Black. I'm a personal fan of Black for sure, and like a couple of things, a couple of really events that left really big impressions for Black. The first is, if we turn back the clock to last year, ESL won New York 2014. And I remember the deciding game of the grand finals. It was Vici Gaming, which Black was on at the time, against EG. Yeah. And Vici, and I think Nahaz mentioned this as well in Frankfurt. I'm not sure if it was publicly or not, but for that last game, they picked the Invoker. And when you talk about, you have players on Vici who play Invoker, you have Super, and of course you have Ice Ice Ice, who has a signature Invoker. They put that Invoker in the hands of Black that very last game, and they trusted him to carry with it. And I just thought, that's a lot of trust. Like that was a time when Vici's fortune seemed to be riding high, basically post TI4, with Black as one of their additions. And I was just like, this is a tremendous amount of trust to put in your carry player. Like I haven't seen him play this all tournament. I haven't seen him play it much at all. But they're just like, you know what? With this championship on the line, we're going to trust you to play Invoker. And he played a very solid Invoker, Exord Invoker, and they managed to basically win that game and take the championship. So that left a really deep impression. I was just like, man, this guy's pretty talented. And for all people saying that he's just an efficient farmer and all that, just consider the difference in role and trust that the team is able to place in him.
Yeah, I feel like Vici's kind of been suffering through this like post-Black curse or something since they kind of lost Black and replaced him with How. They looked definitely a little bit out of the groove, and they weren't able to really put together a run of successes like they had at that time period with Black. And then with Black, since then he hasn't really found his home either. So, maybe I got my fingers crossed for like a Vici Black reunion, but I don't know if that's going to be happening anytime soon.
Yeah, it's just going to be hard to replace Burning, or we'll see how he feels. But here's the other thing in Frankfurt, digging around for Black. So I kind of tried to find out, or tried to ask, why did Black end up not staying in Vici? Like what happened? And I never really got any definitive answer about it, but I'm starting to form a picture. I think just from talking to people and just from getting to know him just a little bit. So, one night I was at the hotel in Frankfurt, and I went to the gym, and I noticed that Black is in the corner, basically on a treadmill, and he's got earbuds on, and he's running, and he's kind of talking. Like I can hear him from like across the room. He's kind of saying stuff like, are you going to give up now, or got to finish this, you piece of shit, or something? He's basically just seems to be cursing someone out. And, as he kept doing this basically for like a good 30 minutes or so. And after a while, because he had earbuds on, I thought he was like on the phone with someone or talking to someone. Eventually, I came to realize that he was talking to himself in his own reflection the whole time, and he was basically pumping himself up so that he could finish this hourly run that he does every single night. Basically, for come hell or high water, he always does that run. And when I spoke to Fnatic's manager, Black used to be something like 300 something pounds. I think he's down in the hundreds now. And
Yeah.
he said that he ran like a marathon in Korea or something. And he just, I mean, this doesn't seem like a particularly Dota relevant story, but he's just supremely competitive, supremely motivated. Whatever he sets his mind to, the personal sacrifice that he had to go through in terms of leaving Germany to go to Asia, and then just the drive that he has. So, bringing this back to kind of what we said earlier, maybe this has some relevance with Alliance and other teams as well. And Chuan is with a certain level of intensity that some of these players have. It may be hard to kind of stay with the team. Like, we're both basketball fans, right? And a lot of the teammates of people, for example, the Jordans and Kobe's and such, they weren't exactly admiring fans, and they didn't exactly enjoy playing with them because that level of excellence is obviously there, but there's a certain level of intensity and kind of maybe even selfishness, and you kind of have to go by the rhythms and the personalities and the force of will of these players, and maybe that rubs somebody the wrong way who's more entrenched in the team. Maybe that doesn't jive with the style, or maybe some cultural consideration, and because of that, maybe the player, not because of skill or any other reason like that, it just can't stay with them on the team for too long. And I wouldn't go so far as to say this, but I think Envy put on his list of cancerous players, he put Black there. Now, obviously, I know I can't testify anything to that. I don't know the guy that well. I know he's the type of dude that will keep his appointment to, be at breakfast at a certain time in the morning. I know that he's really intense and driven, but I think maybe at some point, if you're just too intense, it's very hard for you to just stay on a team with people. And sometimes even when people's personality don't mix, they can still be successful. Like that Vici squad, like Evil Geniuses we saw winning TI5. So it's kind of hard to judge these things. I think he's always been a very talented player, and I'm just all for him as a person because of how driven and motivated he is. So I hope that he lands well, and I hope that whatever team he's on is able to kind of find its footing and validate his achievements, and maybe be a place where he can exert himself and be the focus of that team. Because I have heard that Mushi, for example, is very similar in that this is someone who, he goes to a lot of different teams, and you kind of have to do things Mushi's way, as far as I've heard. So maybe that's ultimately where the conflict came about.
Wow, that's that's an intense anecdote. I've read a few of Black's blog posts and a little bit of his personal story that he shared. I think he has made some posts on some forums, and it's kind of hard to dig up maybe at this point. And it's been a very, very long time since we've had a kind of a glimpse into how he's feeling about things and how he's doing. But he is a little bit difficult on himself, I think. If you've ever read his tweets on social media, a little bit of a self-critical, a little bit of a downer as well. And even with through all of that, I still find his story quite inspiring to know that he kind of made the best out of just every very difficult situation. A lot the West doesn't want me. I'm gonna do everything I need to pick up all my bags, pick up my life, and fly across the world, and join some LGD int team that ends up being filled with controversy and instability, and he keeps just kind of bouncing back after setback after setback. And I think after what you told me about him running on a treadmill, that really was very consistent with already the mental image I had of Black. And I just wish him the best, and hopefully he takes another step forward.
Yeah, so just some other news and notes as far as reshuffling goes. So Cinder and Nicaster formed Stake Gaming with Era and some other players. And, I'm kind of wondering, are you a veggie or steak man? Because it kind of shortly after that, Milk and Merlin, I think with Purge, Monib, and Capitalist formed their own kind of caster squad. So I would love to see these two teams matched up against each other. And I actually hope they get somewhere. And who knows? That might create some kind of a interesting situation where they have to get more casters, and you have casters casting other casters' games. I kind of hope that happens.
Steak guy though, yeah.
All right,
I'm rooting for Sin. Yeah, looks good.
You know what? In every other circumstance, I'd have to say steak. But getting to know some of the people in veggie a little better, I've got to be. This is the first time in my life that I would choose veggie over steak. Let's put it down.
Man. Okay. All right, let's move on. I can't listen to this noise. I can't listen.
So some other, I guess, minor news and notes. Unknown is kind of going to split up with Ztok and Greedy. Ztok, of course, their captain. Greedy was their offlaner heading for Arctic with some other basically South American players, I think Schofield and a few others. And we talked actually earlier about kind of, you mentioned, I think, Funnick as a stand-in before for Empire. There's a player, in the scene with his own sponsorship, Red Bull. We're talking about Jimmy Demon, of course. Kind of a professional stand-in. Yeah, the mercenary. That's
the merc, dog. You gotta call him the right name. Come on, let's go.
All right, Jimmy the mercenary Demon. So I'm still kind of confused about the situation because it seems like he registered for the majors with some players, some Han players, and I think Justin, who used to be on eHug, and some other players. But on the Facebook for the other unknown players, that being Atune, Kotaro, and Excel, they mentioned that they're creating a team with Demon and Justin. So obviously, you've got to give precedence to the actual official signups for Shanghai, but it looks like Demon is once again kind of floating around searching for one of these teams, and he may end up playing with some of these unknown players. So that might be something to keep an eye on. The NA scene obviously is often very unstable, and it's hard to say which teams can emerge and which teams are even going to represent them at these different events. So we'll see how that goes. And speaking of representing at different events, we have kind of a very interesting test tube for teams of different tiers and different regions in the WCA, which will feature several, which I guess will be played a couple days after the summit, which will feature some tier 2, tier 3-ish kind of North American teams, like Team Uporn, which, by the way, awesome. I know Iraj on that squad, awesome sponsorship, and I hope there's some other benefits that come with that, though I doubt there are, but that'd be pretty cool.
I got to shout out XK, their support player, their 5th position. Uporn, rooting for you guys. Great. everything associated with that team. Let's
Imagine the headlines, True. Imagine the headlines.
Oh, I love it, dude. Just free ads for free advertisement, right? Free web traffic. If you weren't, anyways, yeah, okay. Let's keep going.
I'm excited for the first match between Uporn and No Vaseline at some point coming to a tournament near you. But
God, so cringy.
So WCA, it's there's kind of some weird stuff going on. Basically, the qualifiers were played a long time ago, 9 months ago, I think. And
oh my God.
When you have qualified, like teams, a lot of teams don't last 9 months, and that's kind of the situation that happened with that tournament. So Summer's Rift and Not Today, which ceased to exist as teams in VP and Cloud9. So 3 of those 4 teams that are being replaced basically cease to exist currently as teams, or were drastically different 9 months ago. They're going to be replaced by Newbie, Fnatic, Team Empire, and Team Liquid, as well as DC. So that's a huge influx of talent, actually. That's a very nice upgrade. You have a couple of very intriguing and up-and-coming teams there. So I think WCA maybe was beneath the radar of some observers, but this tournament you've got a real rabble, a real mixture there. You've got a couple of kind of tier 2, tier 3 unknown Southeast Asian type teams, and then you have some actually big hitters, Secret, of course, in the field as well. So what do you make about this tournament? What do you make of this tournament? And you know what? Liquid, they have the summit coming up, and then I think 2 days later they have to fly to China for WCA. So that's a lot of Dota.
Yeah, this field of teams is just like, it's legit wild. Like it's just completely crazy. Like they just like put like stuff their hand into this bag of random notes of teams, just like pulled out whatever came out. It's just I don't know, it's just strange. Like you don't really have OG, you don't have EG, but on the other hand you have CDEC, you have Secret, you have LGD, you have Team Empire, Team Liquid. It's just like nuts. And then you have like, I don't know, Extinction, Wings Gaming, Team Uporn, as aforementioned. So I don't know. This is gonna be just like a crazy tournament. There's just so many teams, and so many interesting teams also to follow. It's definitely a tournament to watch. Like when you brought up the fact that this was the same WCA that Summer's Rift qualified for, like that kind of clicked something in my head just now. I was like, wait, that WCA, like the one that feels like it was like 3 years ago I was watching qualifier games for. So like, I don't know. This is just like a crazy online tournament thingy that's gonna hopefully come out to be like some fireworks at the LAN. So yeah, just
Yeah,
pumped, I guess.
that's how it goes, man. You qualify in the winter, and then you play the next winter when
It's crazy.
when your entire team. I don't know how that happened, and but let's just hope that it ends up being some good and entertaining Dota. And some of these other tier 2 teams, maybe keep an eye on. Wings has shown a lot of potential. They've performed very well recently, so who knows? Maybe they could be this year's CDEC.
Okay.
Um,
Okay,
and
okay, all right. I take it back. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I just didn't know.
so adding to the Chinese Dota scene, just a bit of news for some of you creaky, crusty old timers like myself. If you guys remember Yafetz, whose player
Ooh,
name
yeah,
is
it's yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce it actually.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
So he played Dota 1 for a while. He stuck with Dota 1. He kept making videos, but I think he just announced recently on his Twitter that he's more or less done with Dota 1. He's not making those videos anymore. He's going to start playing some CDEC, which is the not just the Chinese team name, but is the Chinese version of in-house league, their NEL, FPL equivalent. So he's going to start moving to Dota 2. Some of these old hands actually did play together on a team called Fantuan, including ZSMJ, who I heard some negative things about in Frankfurt. I heard that he kind of just wanted to exploit his streaming potential, and he would do crazy stuff like dress up as a monk or something, and then just he wasn't really taking the game seriously. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
ZSMJ, like I'm thinking of. Like,
yeah, that's the
that
same
boring
one.
looking dude. All right, sure.
That dude just kind of dressed up like a monk, I think, at some point. That's what I heard. So
Okay, sure.
we'll see. We'll see how these teams fare, and obviously there's a lot of time. There's just like a huge swath of time between now and the next major upcoming tournaments. We mentioned WCA. Obviously, coming a little bit before that, coming up really soon is the Summit. So kind of another premier tournament with some interesting matchups. Maybe most notably, Digital Chaos. Aoi will, for the first time, get to face his old mates, Evil Geniuses, in an official match.
Ooh.
So that's going down in round 1.
Oh, that's sick. Okay, I'm excited. You got me excited. That sounds great.
That's probably the headliner, right? So you have OG versus Mineski as well. Again, these are two teams that were in Frankfurt. Virtus Pro against Vici, and eHome against a suddenly resurgent and very strong Team Liquid. And we'll see if eHome can continue to build on kind of the Frankfurt momentum, where they really seem to find themselves as a team, and a lot of young and talented players. So that will be coming up in a few days, I think a day or two, actually, pretty shortly. And then WCA, I think, will be coming up right after that, unless I'm getting the two mixed up. I don't think I am. And that's going to be a pretty packed December slate, I guess. A nice slate of pre-holiday Dota for us to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's just about it. That might be just about it for this episode. You have anything else to add, Shrew, before we sign off?
Nothing really. I just hope that you have better luck in your pubs, Jack. I remember that little bit of a I don't know, cry for help, plea for for therapy after you had a little bit of a rough run. How solo queue been treating you? I was just curious.
I don't know how many people want to hear about my solo queue stuff.
I want to though. I want to though.
Let's just, you know what, let me just succinctly say this, because everything that I can possibly complain about, everyone else has definitely complained about in some form or other, but there's just a lot of games that are just not Dota. I mean, there's a game that's Dota, and then there's games where nobody's really playing Dota, and it's just over very quickly, and it's just frustrating to be a part of it. But that's just part of the territory. You just have to deal with it, I guess. So with that last little bit of kind of personal, woe is me, complaining, we're going to sign off here. Of course, you can follow us at defenseofthepatience.com. That's our website, defense with an S of thepatience.com. I'm not going to spell the whole thing out. I think you guys can handle that. And you can find Defense of the Patience on iTunes as well. And on Twitter, for our show, it's at DOTP_show. That's not just for our shows. That's for everything in the Defense of the Patience family of shows. I am at KBBQ Dota on Twitter, and my partner is, of course, at Woodshrew Dota on Twitter. And as usual, as part of our DOTP networks, you can check out Try Hard Tuesdays, as well as coming up tomorrow, as usual, Theorycraft Thursdays with Ursinity and Proud. So you can get your dose of Dota in basically all forums and all kind of jurisdictions, so to speak, within the DOTP family. And of course, you can also click through the Amazon banner on our website to support us and all the DOTP shows. We had a lot to talk about this week, and with the reshuffles kind of calming down, but some premium tournaments and matches approaching, we'll hopefully have some very substantial Dota stuff to talk about coming up next week. So thank you for joining us for this latest episode, and have a good Wednesday. May your pubs not be as frustrating and unbearable as some of mine have been.
Cheers, guys.